Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's special webinar. My name is Cheryl Jennison DeProza, and I'm joined today by Gino Sigismondi, and we are joined by our special guest, Michael Pedersen, who is our company historian here at Shure, and he's got a really interesting presentation today to tell us all about the history of the SM57 and the White House. He's got a lot of really cool stories to tell us, so I think you're really going to enjoy yourselves. But before we dive in, just one thing to make note of. As we go through tonight, if you do have any questions, please feel free to put those into the question pane in the box on the right-hand corner of your screen. If you can't see it, just look for that little toolbar with the orange box with the white arrow in it. Click in that. That will maximize that pane and give you access to the question pane. We'll answer as many of those as we can at the end of the session, so please type them in and we'll get to them at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to throw things over to Gino. Gino, take it away.
Okay. Thanks, Cheryl. It's great to have you here tonight, helping us out along with Michael Pedersen.
Thank you, Gino.
So this is my favorite type of webinar to do because in this case,
you don't do much.
That's right. Michael gets to do most of the talking, but it's also great to be able to do this kind of thing as well, to kind of get away from the usual sort of technical info training type things we do, which I know people appreciate and we like doing them too. But sometimes it's fun to get to do something different. And one of the great things about being with a company like Shure with our 90-year history is there's lots of things like this to talk about, lots of great stories. Relates to you some great actually information about the microphone itself, the SM57, as well as why it ended up being the microphone of choice for the President of the United States and why it continues to be and probably will continue to be the microphone of choice. It's also fascinating just to think about all of the, this is just one application of all the varied places that this microphone ends up getting to be. I mean, everyone from the music business side of it knows that, it's the best guitar amp microphone in the world and the best snare drum microphone in the world, and but it just goes to show what a people sometimes describe it as a workhorse, and that's because it's good for so many different things, including it's good enough to pick up the voice of the President of the United States. And if there was, well, I guess we can. Michael, do you want to say anything about the microphones we're actually using to do the webinar tonight?
These are actually 3 SM57s that were retired from the use at the White House. They were used during the Bush one, the Clinton administration, and just the beginning of the Bush two. So you're hearing them. They've been, had all kinds of interesting things said to them, lies and truths.
And been in the belly of Air Force One, right?
Yeah, the C3 transport, C5 transport. Yeah, and probably in Air Force One as well. Yeah.
Tonight it will be all truth through these, though. So don't worry.
Absolutely truth.
And nothing
Nothing
political.
but the truth, yes.
All right, before we get too far off topic here, let's jump right in. Michael, what do you got to tell us about this?
So I started working with the White House in 1990, so that was 25 years ago. So of the 50 years I've been there, essentially 50%. And the main liaison at Shure with what's called the White House Communications Agency, which will be referred to as WACA throughout this whole thing. Why it's pronounced like that, I don't really know. On your screen, you'll see the IEEE Milestone Award, which was awarded to Shure in 2014 for the development of the uniphase principle, which led to the Unidyne microphone. And an SM57 is a Unidyne 3. It's the grandson of the first Unidyne microphone itself. So just take a little bit of the history thing. Here's an ad we did in 1952. 13 years after the Unidyne was introduced, it had become so popular that we ran an ad there, and if you look closely at that ad, you'll see there's no Shure name anywhere on that. Only the microphone. Don't even see our logo. So it becomes so popular that it was basically the microphone that needs no name. And the President of the United States also POTUS, which is our Shure. So we have WACA and POTUS. Sounds I don't want to, it sounds pretty strange. I know exactly. I'll be using that term. So let's just kind of talk about how it got there and how it's changed over the years as well. So if we take a look at this, yep, here is Harry Truman and the Unidyne 1 right in front of Truman's right elbow there. Dewey defeats Truman. That is the Unidyne 1 and the slightly larger one. And here we have Jack Kennedy with the Unidyne 2. Now look really closely at that microphone. See the sophisticated windscreen that is over the front of it? That is basically a piece of cloth that they typed out there.
Oh, I thought that was some kind of like badge or something on his suit. I didn't realize
that is actually on the microphone. And we will talk a little bit about how the White House Communications Agency has gone from really not. So this is from a Shure newsletter August 1965. Bob Carr, manager of our professional products division, reports that we now have a separate professional line of SM microphones, by the way, which stood for studio microphones. And one of the models, the SM57, has been selected for use at all appearances of President Lyndon B. Johnson, installed in the White House television studio and be used elsewhere. So the question I get a lot, and I think we show you this next picture, just take a look. There he is. There's Lyndon Johnson with two SM57s. You notice they are placed badly. They're placed left and right. You don't want to do that, particularly if you combine the two microphones. Why were they placed that way? That's where the photographers wanted them, because it kept the microphones out of the front of the president. Question I get a lot is, how did Shure and the White House Communications Agency get together? There was a young lieutenant in the Air Force at the time, a guy named Dave Clevenger. And Dave Clevenger basically was in the Air Force and got a chance to work at the White House. He went there, I think he was probably 24 years old. And Dave had absolutely no experience in audiovisual. Of course, much with the government, they say you're in charge of audiovisual. And Dave says, I don't know anything about audiovisual, and the colonel says, learn. So at the time, there wasn't things like SynodCon, there really wasn't a lot of texts. And what Dave decided to do was start calling up manufacturers of different equipment to see if he could learn anything. So Dave told me he called Electrovoice, he called Static, I think he might have called AKG, but being an Austrian company, I kind of doubt that. But again, it was many years ago. And he called Shure. And all the companies were very, very eager to work with the White House, as you might imagine. But the mistake that some of our competitors did was that they said, and we will give you all the microphones that you want. That's a bribe. And that will not work when you're dealing with government officials, at least not officially. And they talked to Shure, a guy named Lee Gunter here, who actually had worked in the military during World War II, and he knew that. And he said, we will be glad to give you training, to test things and so forth, but you must buy the microphones. And we also happen to have a microphone we thought would look fairly good with it, which is the SM57. So because of that phone call, that was how the relationship started. We will show you the next photo here. Here's Lyndon Johnson in the actual White House television studio. Again, he has two SM57s there. They have the A2WS windscreens, again, placed left and right because that's where the way the camera guys wanted it. So it goes all the way back again to 65. A little sidebar about Johnson. I think the next photo, okay, let me back up the Johnson here. They started using the 57 for on-air use. They also started using it for public address systems. And at the time, again, WACA was fairly unsophisticated regarding how you protect microphones. And so someone there, and it wasn't Dave Clevenger, said, well, we know that if the microphone gets wet, it's probably not a good idea. And so they said, what can we cover with? And someone came up with the idea of covering the microphone with latex condoms. Now, we've just recently tried putting a latex glove over the microphone, and it really changes its response a little bit, but it does work. Apparently, they actually kept these latex condoms in the podium of the president. There was a drawer there, and everything was fine until one day Lady Bird Johnson decided to open the drawer and found them in there and just didn't know quite what to make about this. And that was the last time that WACA decided to use latex condoms to protect the microphones from water. So it lasted all throughout the Johnson administration.
Now, is that even necessary, though, really, with an SM57? To really, I mean, would you, I mean, I guess if you were out in a monsoon or something, maybe, but...
If you have the foam windscreens on now, the actual pores are so tiny that the water won't get through.
Okay.
So, yeah, you can use an A2WS or the A81WS, and the water won't get through there as well. So next it came, and now all of a sudden we've got 4 microphones on the lectern. As you can see, 2 to his left and 2 to his right. When I talked to Dave about this, Dave said, well, that's because we had a colonel running the White House Communications Agency, and he said, I'm not going to have any damn microphone fail on me, and they had not failed, by the way, so I'm going to put up 4 instead of 2. So that's how they went to 4. There was no technical reason for it. It's just that made the colonel feel better. But they also didn't know that it was not a good idea to take all 4 of those microphones and run them through the PA system at the same time, because you got extreme comb filtering. And for those of you who don't know, comb filtering kind of starts to sound like this. It gets very hollow sounding like that. So Shure went to them and said, you know, it would be much better if you would clump the microphones in front of the president so there wouldn't be this distance between them, and then you can combine them however you want. So they went to 3 microphones, and there's the actual triangle shape of the 3 microphones. That was a triple mount, which we only sold to the White House Communications Agency. This actually is the day when Nixon is resigning. And that 3 mic mount stayed for quite a few years. we will see that there's Gerald Ford with it, quite nice as well. You can see the back of the microphone with the XLR connectors. Jimmy Carter. These are spaced a little bit different. We had made some different versions where the triple mount, or it was like a clover leaf, if you will, was spaced out so you could get those A2WS windscreen. So there was a close spacing and there was a larger spacing as well. Even went through Ronald Reagan, who's trying to remember something there. I'm not sure. It's something about the Iran-Contra hearings, probably. I'm not certain what it was. But was at some fairly famous places as well. Here's the Mr. Gorbachev tear down that wall, and there are 3 SM57s. So they stayed at 3.
That was quite a long time.
Yeah, yeah. For quite a while. So this is from now 65 to, what was it, 85 approximately?
Yeah.
20 years. Here's George Bush saying no new taxes. Boy, I wish thinks he hadn't said that. But this is about the last time you saw the triple mount, because
they got rid of it. Why did they get
rid of it? I will show you. The next photo will tell you this very well. Thank you for leading me into that. The next photo was infamous, and I'll put it up there and let you all have a good laugh, and then we'll explain what happened. The talking hat.
Oh no.
Now George Bush, number 1, was relatively tall. I think he's 6'4" or 6'5", and every time a new president comes in, they rebuild the height of the lectern to match the president, and also the setup for his reading distance so he can read his notes well. The Queen is a short little lady, and they had a box set aside that was supposed to be set there so she would stand on top of it. Well, everybody forgot, and she walked up and started giving her speech, and all you could see was the hat. She kind of looks to me like the elephant lady. It's like a trunk coming out of there. This is the photo that went out around the world, and also the video shot, and the BBC and the British press went crazy. So, much like any other government agency, did they blame the person or whatever who didn't put the microphones? And literally, like the day after this, we get a call. We got to do something about those microphones. Look what happened. So that led to the double mount. Look very, very closely at that photo, if you can see on your screen, and you can see the third microphone has been removed in a very sophisticated way. We sawed off the middle piece. And that's actually what we started doing. Waka sawed off some of those. We sawed off, and then we redesigned it so that middle piece wasn't really there. But that's actually how it went from 3 to 2, and the reason was the Queen of England. So we get the Bush number 2. Now let me back up just a second and look at Clinton number 1, and look at the actual holder portion of the microphone. You can see it's a piece of metal with a little bit of plastic in there. You go to Bush number 2, and you can see they are actual shock mounts. They are based on our A55M shock mounts. Why was that? Well, when Bush number 2 would get frustrated or didn't know what to say, he would start pounding on the lectern. And that actually would put vibrations up through that other mount, because the other mount had no shock mount on it. And again, we get a panic call from Waka saying, we got to do something about this. So we basically did some quick sketches and made up a little yoke and took 2 of our A55Ms and put them onto a shock mount like this. And this is actually what's been used now since probably around 2000, I believe it is. In fact, I've got one right in front of me right now, which is the microphone is mounted in. And here's President Obama. Notice it's a wet day, and I did that on purpose. It's to show you that when you have a lot of wind and wetness, you can actually put that A81WS windscreen on, which we're going to demonstrate a little bit later. And here, there's virtually no wind noise, and certainly can keep the water out of it. So that kind of gives you up to date. So, who invented the Unidyne 3 microphone? Well, it wasn't Ben Bauer, some of you will understand, but it was actually this gentleman, Ernie Seeler. And he actually came into Shure in 1954. He was born in Cuba of German parents and then emigrated to the United States from Germany. Was a big classical music fan, despised rock and roll, and really bothered him that his microphone became one of the most popular.
So that's kind of an irony, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. He started working on the Unidyne 3 with Ben Bauer, and Ben Bauer left here in 1958 to work for CBS Labs. But that's the guy right there, Mr. Bauer.
Let's see.
Here's a Unidyne 3 microphone from 1959. That was the first one, the model 545. Notice the connector. It is a screw-on Amphenol connector. It was not an XLR connector.
Is there any significant difference between the 545 and the 57 besides the color of it?
No, the actual acoustical aspect of it, the uniphase principle, the capsules are the same.
All the same.
Yep.
Okay. But I would assume the 57 wouldn't want to use, I mean, the president wouldn't want to use that one because of how shiny it is, maybe?
That's true, and we will get that in just a, thank you, Gino, you jumped way ahead.
Oh, sorry, getting ahead of myself.
No worries, no worries. So, now we're going to get into the technical aspects of it. So, why is the 57 the microphone of choice for the POTUS? So this is the next statement you can see is our official statement, engineering statement to the White House Communications Agency. By the way, that is a military organization. They change all the time. Every 9 months, there's like different people in there. So we almost have to keep retraining them and reteaching them every time as new people come in. So the POTUS microphone, used in a variety of environmental situations, and failure in any situation is unacceptable. So it'll be used indoors and outdoors, from very cold to very hot temperatures, very dry to very humid, no wind to high wind, and of course the physical abuse from packing and shipping around the world. So the unanimous recommendation of Shure Engineering is that a dynamic microphone should be used when absolute reliability is demanded. We make condenser microphones. Condenser microphones have come a long, long way. They're valuable tools, and we all use them for different things. But they are best in controlled, benign environments. Basically means controlled air conditioning, controlled humidity, controlled temperatures. And they're not really recommended for critical applications where environmental conditions are uncontrolled. And that's the important situation. They really have no control about the environmental conditions where the president's going to be speaking. So now let's talk about the reasonings that support this. And again, we're not putting down condenser microphones, we're pointing out the engineering differences between dynamics and condensers. Mean time between failures. So a condenser microphone inherently less reliable because guess what? It's got more parts. If you take a SM57 and you kind of count the parts, probably between 20 or 30, where a typical condenser microphone the same size will probably be between 150 and 200 because of the circuit boards inside and all the different parts. Nothing wrong with those parts, it's just the more parts you got, the more likely they are to fail. And we're going to talk about the mean time between failure. Mean time between failure is basically take 100 microphones and what time period will it be before one of them fails. I'm going to ask you all just to think about this, or if you want, send in a question about what you think the mean time between failure is for an SM57. We will reveal that later in the presentation. We'll let Gino guess. Gino probably knows. Maybe Cheryl doesn't know. I'm not sure. We'll see. Just to give you an idea, there's the SM57 service parts. You can see what you've got in there. You've got a capsule. You've got a transformer. This actually is an old one because you can see it's a changeable impedance. Yeah, so this is probably from early 80s, yep. But there's not much inside of there, so there isn't really much to fail, and that basically means that you have longer mean time between failures. High humidity and high temps. Combination of those two can cause unwanted noise in the condenser microphone, hissing, popping, crackling. It happens because the diaphragm has a very thin coating of gold on it, and when you go from a hot temperature to a cold temperature, or cold temperature to hot temperature, you can actually get condensation water on the actual back of the condenser. And since there's only 1/10,000th of an inch between the back of the condenser diaphragm and the back plate, that basically causes it to crackle or pop or sometimes short out. It can actually change the sound of the condenser as well. You can have complete failure. And all those things are likely with humidity levels above 95% and temperatures over 100 degrees. Very easy to reach those conditions in shipping and storage. Just think about a black tarmac, Washington, D.C. in August at Andrews Air Force Base, for example. Wind noise. Now we're going to do a little demo here. A condenser diaphragm weighs about 1/1000th the mass of a dynamic microphone, because a dynamic microphone is a diaphragm and this heavy coil of wire hanging off the back of it. So since it's many times lighter, the condenser diaphragm will be very easily moved by wind. And so you have to have a very large windscreen to cut down the wind noise. Sadly enough, the size of the windscreen actually determines how effective it is. You have to basically surround the microphone by more and more still air, if you will. And also because of the lightweight diaphragm, a condenser microphone is much more likely to pop from P words and exhalations of breath. So let me just show you a little demo here. I've got a Shure SM94 right here. And this is a condenser microphone that's has about the size, diaphragm is about the size of an SM57. So what I'm going to do is just going to take this and I'm going to blow into it like some wind going. And I don't have headphones on, so Gino will give me the thumbs up when we've made enough noise. Okay, that's the SM94. Now we're going to go to the SM57, and this is with the SM57 with just the, Cheryl took the windscreen off. This is the SM57 without a windscreen. Okay. Here's an SM57 in front of me, which we've got the A2WS windscreen, which is the actual smaller windscreen. And now Cheryl's going to put on her SM57 the really big windscreen and try to blow on it. And she's trying.
I'm trying.
Let's try popping. Take the windscreen off, and Cheryl's going to take an SM57, no windscreen, and try to pop it.
Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. How many pickled peppers would Peter Piper pick?
Okay, now just put the windscreen on and do the same thing.
How many pickled peppers did Peter Piper pick?
So I hope you can hear that about the difference between a dynamic and a condenser in high wind, and also the popping aspect of it. So that's another reason that dynamics are favored. Long-term performance. Performance characteristics of a condenser mic can change substantially over time. They're getting much better, but they are still not as stable as dynamic mics. So the new condenser mic can sound much different than an older one of the same model. And this basically makes it imperative that a customer, if they have a bunch of condenser mics, use the ones that are all about the same age. But when you have a task facility with over 400 microphones, and that's essentially Waka has over 400 SM57s, they don't have time to sit there and match them. So basically, dynamic mics remain stable as they age, and they tend to sound about the same until retired from the service, which basically means they can grab 20 or 30 and know that they're all going to sound pretty much the same. You know, a condenser microphone requires phantom power applied via its mic cable to operate. It's really unlikely that phantom power provided by the audio mixer would fail. Failure of phantom power is very unusual, but it could be switched off accidentally by a end user or a engineer. But a more likely problem is noise, because when you've got DC power flowing in the cable, you've got bad cables or loose or dirty connectors, it can really make a lot of crackling, a lot of noise. So again, phantom can be your friend as long as all the connections are good and there's no dirt in the connections. But that same cable and connector, same dirt, same connectors, should be perfectly quiet when you're using a dynamic microphone because there's no phantom power flowing in the cable. You agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So the conclusion is that though we understand the desire for a lower profile or a thinner microphone, because we do manufacture some models, we say still that a dynamic microphone is the absolute reliability is required that you want a dynamic microphone. Condenser microphones continue to get better, but they still have the same problems, and they will always require some type of phantom power, and that problem won't go away. I'll leave this on the page for you if anybody want to write that down. These are some of the engineering treatises that we use to support our discussions, as well as just our 90 years of experience.
I'll just add an editorial comment,
Please.
just because it's sort of, I mean, after watching this, you might start thinking to yourself, well, geez, maybe I shouldn't even use condenser microphones. But, I mean, condenser microphones are really good today, and they are very reliable, especially in the more controlled environments. But the point here is that if you are responsible for providing audio for the President of the United States of America, and you do not want it to fail, then you want as little risk
Right.
as possible.
Right.
So even though 99.5% of the time, maybe a condenser microphone would be okay, you're not even going to take that risk.
Right.
You're going to go with the thing that you know is going to be reliable and you know is
Microphones, condenser microphones have got there. But it's controlled. They have control of the humidity, they have control of the environment, there's no wind noise in there, etc.
they don't have to be transported
And they don't have to be transported
belly of an aircraft
at minus 40, minus 40 C, and then you're down on the ground, now it's 100 F,
Right,
Yep,
exactly.
absolutely. So here's some other reasons that they prefer it. The matte finish on the 57 doesn't reflect television lights or photographic flash. The dark gray finish blends well with the POTUS lectern and the dark clothing typically worn by the POTUS.
So unlike the 545 we saw earlier,
Right.
which was shiny.
Yeah, exactly. No on-off switch.
Also something the 545 has.
Right. So it cannot be accidentally by POTUS or a staff member. The locking windscreen on the A2WS allows it to be set in place and held by a set screw so it stays a proper distance from the mic diaphragm. And the larger windscreen, the A81WS, can be added in high wind conditions and is very effective. There was the signing of the Egypt and Israeli peace agreement. Carter was there, Begin, and I think Sadat. I remember it was like 45-mile-an-hour winds. The flags were just straight out. And they had 57s with the larger windscreens on. You heard not a bit of wind. So We came back to that. Calculated mean time between failures of the SM57. It is. Did you get anybody writing in any answers?
We got some. Yeah, I think some people didn't quite understand the question. One person said 0, which I don't think is possible.
No. That would be very bad.
Failure out of the box would not be.
Another person said 1,000,000 years. That's somebody who works here who should know better than that. I mean, that's you know. I mean, we'd like to hope, but we don't know. Might be.
Could be.
Somebody else says 1.88 million hours.
I have to divide that.
Yeah, that's too much math.
Tonight.
No math.
It's an evening webinar.
Somebody else said 99.9999997. They didn't say what, but that's good. That's good.
But what they're saying is that it's a very small percentage rate.
And then I like this one. This one is this is more of a comment, not a guess. They said if the mean time between failures is 50 years, it may be a problematic 50th anniversary.
Good. Frank Beecham, was that you? Anyways, the answer is 58.2 years. So I should retire another 8.2 years, and we should be just fine. But anyways, they've never had a failure in over 50 years from all the microphones that they have. They've had cable failures. They had one that was run over by a Humvee, but we didn't really consider that a failure. But they've never actually had a failure during the actual use of it by the president. So if they're so reliable, why do they use 2 of them? Well, just in case there is a mic failure in the future, just like Gino said. The 157 feeds the public address system. The other one feeds to the broadcast audio pool, which is essentially like a large number of XLR connectors, each isolated from the other. And any broadcaster, TV, radio, internet can grab an output. One of these pool signals is used to record the POTUS speech for the National Archives. But either one can be quickly reconnected to feed the other in case there is a failure. So it's there just because if it ever does happen, they want to have a backup plan and not have to say, please, Mr. President, could you stop for a second while we readjust this?
I'm glad you mentioned that because we do get questions a lot from people who, you know, are tempted to use 2 microphones because they see the president using 2 microphones and assume that they're both on. And then they turn them both on, and then they get a lot of comb filters because there is some space between them.
Yes.
You know, you can only get a dynamic element so close to another one, and then they're wondering why it sounds bad. It never sounds bad when the president uses them, and
you're only hearing one.
You're only hearing
one.
one.
They're both active. They're just being fed to different places. Right. So if that's the case, why were the 357s? Why were they employed 357s, and what were the functions? Well, they were very similar. They were one the public address, one the broadcast audio feed, and one for recording for the National Archive. And they basically just decided, well, we do the broadcast audio feed and the National Archive feed from the same microphone. So that's when they went down to 2. So it's been used for 50 years, but it's not frozen in time. A lot of people say, well, you know, you haven't done anything to the 57 in 50 years, and that is hardly the case. So what we're going to do now is take a little time and go through and see what has happened to the 57s over the years. So this is a partial list of improvements. Some of these we've announced, some of them we've not, but we constantly change these things no matter what. First thing we did was we eliminated a dual low impedance output transformer as the 50 ohm output became an obsolete standard. That was actually a standard that was used in broadcast in the 40s and the 50s. That improved the reliability because we replaced a press-on connection with a soldered connection. We replaced the procedure of spraying on doping material, which was used to change the acoustical impedance of the cloth in the acoustical network. The cloth is now purchased with the correct acoustical impedance. As you might imagine, spraying on material is not as accurate for impedance as buying something where the impedance is already pre-measured. We used to use wool felt as the acoustical resistance that was used to seal up the rear of the microphone cartridge. The felt would absorb water and expands and contracts with humidity. This affected the acoustical seal. So now we use a polyurethane for that. Improve the diaphragm material. It's now a mylar with a special coating, which is used to make the diaphragm rigid in the center but pliable at the edges. And what this did was improve the high frequency response. We replaced aluminum voice coil wire with a copper-clad wire that improved the reliability by making a more secure solder connection. We upgraded the paint and the painting procedure many times in the last 50 years, which improved the finish durability. We changed the shock mount to butyl rubber. That basically basically allowed the shock mount to last for longer and not stiffen up, or essentially get like tire rot, if you will. We changed the type of cement, which we used to connect the voice coil to the diaphragm. Better bonding, improved reliability again. We changed the transfer and handle potting material. The actual transformer is held into the handle with a potting material. It's the hot melt plastic now. Plastic is more resistant to high temperatures and also seals up that handle for acoustic leaks. redesigned transformer with better hum rejection, a different, we replaced the grill cement that we use, or cement that we used to use on the grill with an ultrasonic weld, again, more reliability. All the manufacturing test procedures are computerized. It's improved consistency from unit to unit. Doing all these things actually increased the output sensitivity by 1.5 dB. Didn't change the magnet, just doing all those things actually made it a hotter output level. We replaced the laminated copper mesh resistance with a laser drilled precision stainless steel ring. Again, better environmental stability and better consistency. We changed the internal steel ring to increase the front wall thickness. That basically made the drop test even better. Laser trimming of the diaphragms, improved consistency of the performance, redesigned grill and resonator to a floating design that reduced the free play and got rid of chances of rattle. And of course, everything is RoHS compliant, which is getting rid of lead and other dangerous things. So, people say, well, you did all these things, how come you didn't publicize it? Number one, we don't want to alert our competitors to improvements, even though they're listening in now. They know that.
They're not listening.
But we don't tell them how we did it. We just tell them what we did. And also, we don't want counterfeiters to know these technical details and improve their face. Unfortunately, when you have a product like the 57, which is popular around the world, there are fakes made. And they do a fairly good job of making them look like the 57s, but they certainly don't sound them, nor do they last as well as our microphones as well. So these are the reasons we don't publicize this.
It's really interesting that you mention all of that, because I know there's a common misconception out there sometimes that the SM57 is quote-unquote old technology. But that's kind of evidence that, you know, we didn't design it 50 years ago and then sit on it. No. You know, there's been many improvements over the years, and you know, I'm sure that the White House would have moved to something else a long time ago if there was something newer that was proven to be better.
Absolutely, and it's old technology. You see it. Telecaster and a Stratocaster is old technology. A dynamic loudspeaker is old technology as well. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you just have things which are axioms, and they just work really well. Coca-Cola bottle. So for those historians out here, here's the actual first Shure catalog to feature the SM57. This is 1967. That's the first, and there's also the 5 SM56, which we don't make anymore, but that was a pistol grip with a little shock mount on the bottom of it. And it actually had a switch on there. It doesn't show up, but it was actually a switch that allowed you to select for low, medium, or high impedance on it. And here is the first retail price. In 1968, it was $63 in U.S. retail. The retail price now is $124, but if it had kept pace with inflation, the current price would be $431. So it really hasn't gone up much in those many, many years.
Cheaper.
Yeah, almost. Well, yeah, exactly. This here is the actual design drawing of it. It was designed by a guy named Bob Deshaw, and he did not work at Shure. He was an outside designer, but he designed the look of the 545 and the SM57. We did get a design patent on there. The grill does rotate on purpose. It's not there to change the pattern or anything else. That's just the way it was designed and allowed it to clip on. And it's still employed by the President of the United States, and we hope for many more years. And even included at very famous events like when when Chicago does win the championship every now and then. This is actually the Blackhawks championship, and those microphones there belong to the mayor, who you can see is to his left in his gray.
There he is. I didn't notice him before.
Gray T-shirt, Blackhawks T-shirt. And that's just a cool shot of the White House with 2 SM57s and the 81 WS windscreen on it. So that's basically gives you an idea of the 57, why it's been used for so many years, how it went from 4 mics to 3 mics to 2 mics. And now, Cheryl, if we've got any questions, I will be happy to entertain them.
Oh, we have questions. We have quite a few questions, actually.
Right.
Yes.
We got time.
Okay, so right off the bat, first question. Other than cost, it's not so much specifically to POTUS, but other than cost, does the SM57 have any advantages over the SM7B for use by speech broadcasters or radio podcasters?
That's a good question. Actually, the SM7B mic element is based on an SM57. It simply has a larger rear acoustical space, which gives you that big low end. Mm-hmm. So the advantage of the 7B is that it just basically kind of has a larger FM announcer's voice aspect of it. But if you can't afford one, 57 makes a pretty good substitute. So they are really close kissing cousins.
All right. Okay, let's see. Next, what is the mean time between failures for the SM81?
I don't have that information, but if they wanted to send that question to support@shure.com, we can ask our QA people to look that up, and we can respond to that person. So again, send that question to support@shure.com. We'll ask our quality assurance folks to look it up, and we'll be able to tell you.
Okay, this next series of questions I'm going to call the why not instead of questions. Okay. Why not the SM58 instead of the SM57?
Good question. Basically, it has to do with the windscreens. The A81WS windscreen, that larger windscreen, does not fit on an SM58, and is extremely effective at reducing wind noise. So, and they also happen to like the cylindrical look of the A2WS. So that was an SM58 and an SM57 with an A2WS windscreen have about the same pop protection, about the same wind protection. But White House has always liked that cylindrical windscreen for the way it looks, and the A81WS will not fit on the SM58.
Okay. Why not the Beta 57A instead of the SM57?
Good question. Couple reasons. The primary reason is that the supercardioid, and it's a little bit narrow pattern, and the president, we tried it for a while just as testing with the president, and he tends to wander out of the actual angle a little bit too easily. So the supercardioid in that case worked against us. So if the Beta 57 was a cardioid, maybe it would have been changed. The output level being hotter with the Beta 57 really didn't make any difference because they can just simply go to the board and change, pull it up by 4 dB.
I wonder if the color would have been problematic.
Yeah, the color would be a problem. Yeah, go back about this. Think about this. They don't have a custom-made microphone because they want to be able to get that microphone wherever they are in the world. And so if they had a custom-made Beta 57 with a custom paint job, and they needed one because the plane got delayed or whatever, they pretty just can't go down to their local guitar center in Tanganyika and get it,
Why wouldn't they use the 56 stand-mounted model?
I don't know. I wasn't here during that. I mean, the 56 is gone. It certainly probably wouldn't have been okay because of the fact that it did have that nice shock mount on it. But I do not know there, and unfortunately that is not in the histories. So good question. I just don't know.
What about an SM56 2015 edition?
Yeah, what about that?
We will submit that comment to our marketing department for further consideration.
Yeah, it was never a big seller for us, but it was a really nice microphone. Where I saw most of them was in Vegas, and the pit orchestras in Vegas, they were all over it because they were just, the good shock mount, they could aim the microphone. But yeah, my opinion, I think a revival of SM56 would probably be a good idea.
Has the 57 always been a wired mic, and if so, why don't they use wireless?
I can answer this.
Go ahead.
Because Michael said it already 100 times. Absolute reliability,
Mm-hmm.
and that probably comes with the caveat again, which is most wireless microphone systems say modern systems are really good, and most of the time they work without a dropout. But we'll get people who will call us and say, "I want a wireless microphone, but you have to guarantee me that I will not get a dropout." Then you should probably use a wire.
Or here's what
no one can make that guarantee.
I'm at home, and I have a cell phone and a wired phone, and my house is on fire. What phone am I going to pick up? You're going to pick up the wired phone.
Yeah.
Unless you want to take the phone outside with you as you run outside.
There was another part to that question, which was, has there ever been a wireless version of the SM57? And actually, there hasn't been. The 58, yes, of course, as long as there's been Shure wireless microphones, there's been wireless SM58s. Yep. But again, the application for that tends to be more handheld, and that's where you usually see the 58 being used. A 57, when it is used for like speech in this application, it's not being held in the hand. It's down in a fixed location. And kind of rule of thumb with wireless is always, well, don't go wireless unless you absolutely have to.
Right.
And if the 57 is sitting on a podium being used for speech, use a cable.
The White House does own Shure UR wireless and also some ULXD. And they use it for like question and answers, town halls, and so forth, but you will never see it for an address to the nation.
Okay, with the president kind of being so far away from the mic on the podium, what about proximity effect?
Proximity effect is always there. It just gets greater as you get closer. So typically, if you measure from the president's mouth to the mic itself, it's about 18 inches. So it's there, but very, 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 very minimal. Gain before feedback is an issue, but they typically have the loudspeakers in, more towards the audience side, and so that's typically not much of an issue. But proximity effect really, it'll happen when I really get in close to mic like that. But proximity effect, you start to You notice when you're probably within 2 inches or left, certainly not at 18 inches.
Okay, so a kind of a question along the lines the same sort of question. How does it catch the sound when it's like 1 to 1.5 feet away from the president's mouth? They seem like to be used more like shotgun mounts. What amount of gain is applied to them?
Oh, as far as actually gain settings on the mixing board, I have no idea. But a microphone doesn't stop working at a certain distance. A microphone measures whatever air movement moves to it. Also, you have to realize the President of the United States is a trained orator. He's not going to sit there and talk like this. He's going to speak in a loud voice, a paced thing, and direct his energy at the microphone. Bill Clinton was particularly good about that. When Bill Clinton was asked a question from the far left or far right of the audience, he didn't turn his head and face it. He would move his whole body to the left or the right, and so that the microphone was always between him and the person he was addressing. So they learn mic techniques, and they also, again, just address their, use an adult voice, for lack of a better term.
Okay, now we're in the series of questions about preamps. What preamp is used by the White House?
The last time I saw, they were using a Yamaha mixer. I think they still use a Yamaha mixer. There is no separate mic preamp. They go right into a mixing board which has the mic preamps built into it.
Could you recommend a preamp to use with the SM57 for speech broadcast applications?
I'm a big fan of the Grace M101. I think it's a great preamp. It's quiet. It's about $500. It works great with the SM7. Works great with the SM57. It's just, Grace makes good stuff.
How much gain is required from, you might have just answered this, how much gain is required from a preamp to drive the SM57?
Like the SM7, I would say at least 60 dB a gain minimum.
Okay.
Especially when you're talking about speech from a little bit further away, you're going to need good quiet gain.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So any of the cheaper preamps that only have 40 dB of gain and it's a little noisy when you crank them up, that's something you want to stay away from.
Yeah, Jim's point is it's got to be gain, but it has to be quiet gain, and that's not cheap.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Why does the plastic grill cover rotate and eventually rattle on the 57?
I actually talked to, well, first of all, if it rattles, send it back. It's not supposed to rattle. But I actually talked to Bob Deshaw, who is now 90 years old, about that, and there really wasn't a reason for it. It was just an easy way to mount that grill. They liked the style. They thought about screwing it on, but that was a problem. And so it's literally like a C-clip that fits in there and holds that microphone. So it was just a fallout of the actual industrial design. There wasn't any reason specifically for that, except that was a cheap and easy way to get it on there and not have it fall off. But if it does rattle, send it back to us.
What is the part number for the dual mic clip used by the White House staff? This person can't seem to find them in the stores. He can only find the single shot.
Yeah, it's called a VIP 55 SM. And you can buy them from Shure parts, and you can actually buy them from Shure dealers. For many years, they were actually made one by yours truly, and I got tired of doing that. And so now it actually is a part you can buy. 50, is it VIP 55 SM? Yeah. Oh yeah, Gino says, yeah, it's right on this. Yes, it is, VIP 55 SM. So you can go call Shure Parts to get one. You can go get it through dealers. I think
it'd be a special order through the dealer. They wouldn't have them in stock.
I think B&H and Full Compass stocks them now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Where is the 57 made?
Juarez, I think, isn't it? Or is it Juarez and Suzhou? I think we build them in both places now.
I think it's built in both places,
yeah. We have facilities, Shure-owned facilities with Shure employees in Juarez, Mexico, since 1985, and then in Suzhou, China. And I believe we make them in both places now. We do that for a very specific reason. You never want to be single-sourced. If there was a earthquake or some type of political unrest in Mexico and we had to shut down the plant, we want to have some other place to get it. So they're built in both places. They meet exactly the same specs. We would never change that.
Okay. Questions about, and I think we kind of touched on this, but just to reiterate, is the element of the 57 the same as the 58?
Yes. End of story.
Done.
I wish in live presentations I was like looking at people's faces when we say that, because there's a lot of.
The difference is the ball grill. And when you take any microphone element and you surround it with a structure, it will slightly alter the response.
Why was the SM57 never upgraded to a neodymium magnet? I probably mispronounced that.
Neodymium magnet?
Yes.
We could have.
That's what the Beta 57 is.
That's what the Beta 57
dun,
is.
dun.
But it's also new Coke, old Coke. You don't change something that's successful.
Yes.
So we could have upgraded it to a neodymium and changed absolutely nothing and made it sound exactly the way, and the internet would say it's not the same. So in that case, we just decided like an SM58 or 57, SM7B, like that. Some things you just don't change.
Okay. Wow, we've got a lot of questions and comments. I think this is the hottest topic we've ever had.
We'll keep going until I lose my voice.
Okay, let's see. Hold on. Just sifting through.
Okay.
Would there be a way to hide a 185 capsule for cases with the look of the 57 is like in a 57 when you want the look of 57 but the more gain before feedback of a 184 or 185?
You don't get more gain before feedback between 184 and 185. Absolutely untrue. Could you hide a condenser element in there? Sure, you could. But
I've seen people do that with 55s.
Right. Yeah, you take
a mini condenser inside of there, but
right.
Yeah, you could, but yeah, it might not. Yeah. I mean, the reason to do that, I would think, would be if you wanted the sound characteristic of the condenser microphone in the look of a 57, but it wouldn't get you more gain before feedback.
Right. Gain before feedback is a whole another subject. We've done webinars on those.
That one is archived.
And that one is archived. Yep.
Yep. All right. Oh my goodness, so many questions.
Keep going, Cheryl.
What about ribbon mics for POTUS?
Oh, wind noise. Oh, man. You think a condenser's bad.
I think you answered that one next.
Okay. I absolutely love my SM7Bs, but would love the same sound with more output before the preamp sees it. There are inline devices to help, but it's not quite the same. Any plans for a hotter SM7B, SM57 style mic?
Not that I'm aware, but I'm not in the product planning aspect of it. So what I hear this person saying is, could you build a preamp inside the SM7? You know, we've thought about that before, about the idea of having a microphone that maybe has one output level without phantom power and a different output level with phantom power. That's certainly possible. We'll pass it on to the product guys. I've not heard of anything coming down their way, but that's the way it is.
Why does President Obama still often use the non-shock mounted dual 57 clips?
Well, they've got some. I mean, I hate to sound so mundane, but that's the aspect of it. Also, there are a couple guys at Waka that actually like the lower profile look of that, and Obama doesn't pound on electron, so he can get away with that. But most of them is the shock mounted ones. They've retired most of the other ones, so it's just so consistency. I'm sure sometimes they just grab something off the shelf or what's actually in the pack itself. You know, don't overthink this stuff. This is a military organization that has to support this, and you know, the president might be out making 5 stops, and the vice president may be out making 5 stops, and the first lady may be out making 5 stops, and sometimes they just grab what's available.
Okay. Would you typically need to boost low end because of the distance?
No, because this is speech. You know, you're not trying to sound like Frank Sinatra or something like that. You want speech, and really you want the low frequency rolled off, as long as it still sounds like the president. So
for clarity, it's probably better to be further away and not have that proximity effect.
Yep.
Do you recommend cloud lifters for dynamic mics?
I've never tried one. I've heard lots of people that like them. For those of you who don't know, it's basically like an inline preamp that when you add phantom power, it gives you, I think, fixed 20 dB of gain with that. And some people like them. They have an SM7B, and they've got a preamp they like, but the preamp's only got 40 dB of gain, and you put the cloud lifter in there, gives you 20 dB additional one. So yeah, I've heard good things about it. Never tested it, but seems like a decent product.
Okay. Sort of a left field question, but since it's about a 57, why not? Can you explain why people bottom mic a snare drum?
Do you know?
To get the sound of the snares more directly than you get it from the miking it just on the top. So yeah, it's a creative choice to get that different kind of sound quality.
More rattle.
More rattle. Yep. More snare noise.
They want to know why or how?
They wanted to know why.
Yeah. So that's it.
So all right.
Timbre.
I think I accidentally deleted somebody's question, so sorry if I deleted your question. If you think of it or you have that burning desire to get it answered, just send an email to support@shure.com or any of your other questions. We got a lot of smart guys that can answer those questions for you there. But I think that about wraps it up. That's all the questions that I had here. So we want to thank you so much for joining us. We hope you learned a lot.
Hope you enjoyed it.
And hopefully we'll see you next month at our next topic.